Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Bracketology. It is March 8th, exactly 1 week until Selection Sunday. I've got my most recent projection here. I'll unveil it, and if there's some questions at the end, we will get to it. But today, a new projection. We've had a couple of automatic bids clinched. We had Tennessee State winning the Ohio Valley last night, and then LIU advancing to the NEC championship game, where they will get in no matter what because Mercyhurst is still transitioning from Division 2. So it's been a we had Belmont lose in the Missouri Valley. That championship game is going on right now. Northern Iowa leads 30-20. We've got the Big South championship game on now, so bids are starting to be clinched here. But let's get to it. We have got the only real change, like I said on the right here, is that Northern Iowa is taking that spot. Northern Iowa is taking that spot at the 12, which Belmont had. I'd have to look into it a little closer if they do actually clinch and see how they stack up against some of those 13s. But I just put them in there for now, because that is where Belmont was. In terms of the 1 seeds, we do have a change. The top 3 have been the top 3 for quite a while, but Florida has overtaken UConn, in my opinion. And I would like to show some stats here. Okay, so there's some information, but here. So Florida and Connecticut. Connecticut had been ahead very slightly for quite a while. In terms of resume numbers, they're about the same. They're either 4th or 5th in all, 3 of them. Florida does have the edge in the quality metrics, and then UConn does have this Q3 loss, less Q1 wins, even though they do have more Q1A wins. The only reason that this would even be close is the fact that Connecticut did beat Florida on a neutral, but that, of course, is not something that we're looking at right now as being close enough to tip the scales to Connecticut. So Florida will be the last 1 seed, and if you can guess, UConn will be going to the 2 line. We have got Michigan State, Illinois, and Houston staying there. Not a whole lot to discuss there, really. We had UConn take that loss to Marquette, which opened the door for Florida. Illinois is beat Maryland. And then we had Michigan and Michigan State in action later today. I don't know. I think the 1 seed might be a little bit too far off for Michigan State, even if they are able to beat Michigan, but we'll have to see if that does happen. And then Houston in the South, that is in Houston. That would be big for them if they could get that. So the order of the 2 seeds is UConn, Houston, Michigan State, and Illinois. In terms of 3 seeds, we have got a little bit of a change here also. We've got Alabama coming up, taking the last spot there. Very, very interesting situation for them. Not really. They have just sort of not been affected by this Bediako situation at all. In terms of their gameplay, they're probably better without him. And they've continued to win some games. They have now got 8 quad 1 wins and just 1 loss outside the top quad. They've got very good resume metrics, which boost them over some of the teams in the 4 line, which we'll get to later. But the order of the 3 seeds is Iowa State, who are pretty close to the 2, in my opinion. I think they could overtake one of the 2 Big Ten teams there. Purdue at 10, Alabama at 11, and then Texas Tech at 12. Purdue did go on the road and beat Alabama earlier this year, so it would be really hard, road head-to-head, really hard to overcome that. Purdue still has 5 quad 1 wins, still 8 total quad 1 wins, and no losses outside of quad 1. Despite them not playing some great ball recently, they're still going to be up here on the 3 line. All right, in terms of the 4 seeds, we have got Nebraska, Virginia, Vanderbilt, and Gonzaga. Gonzaga is the top 4 seed, then Virginia, then Nebraska, then Vanderbilt. There was some, maybe thinking about pushing Virginia up to that 3 line after their win yesterday, but, um, I just didn't pull the trigger. They're pretty, significantly behind in the quality metrics. They do have 3 quad 1 wins and 4 opportunities, which is probably more impressive than, a 4-6 or a 5-7 record, but I think protected seed is probably their limit right now. In terms of the other 3 teams, Vanderbilt picked up a huge road win yesterday against Tennessee, which pushes them ahead of the Volunteers a little bit, in my opinion. Um, you're getting into some, really good quad run records here. 8-6 for Vanderbilt, just 1 loss outside of the top quad to an Oklahoma team that is surging. So it's all very close in here. And then in terms of the 5 seeds, Kansas is our first 5 seed. I do think there's a pretty good chance that Kansas can get to that protected seed line. But, really those 5 teams are competing for those 4 spots, and just felt like Kansas lacks a little bit there. They do have a quad 2 loss. Their predictives are around 19. In fact, all 3 of them are 19. Just a little bit behind, Vanderbilt, Nebraska, who are in the mid-teens and still have an equal amount of wins in quad 1 despite playing fewer games and all that. So I think Kansas just misses out right now. Tennessee right behind them. Talked about them earlier with Vanderbilt. We did have Wisconsin coming up onto this line. They did go on the road yesterday and beat Purdue. And in addition to UNC losing their best player for the rest of the year in Caleb Wilson, we felt like it was, a good opportunity to flip them. Wisconsin's still lacking a little bit in the numbers compared to the teams that they're around, but they do have 3 elite road wins and 4 quad 1A wins, 8 total quad 1, and just 2 losses outside of the top quad. So I had them, Arkansas, and then Wisconsin filling the last 5, and basically just switched with North Carolina. So North Carolina is the first 6. They've been without Caleb Wilson for a little bit right now, but it was always expected that he would come back. He breaks his thumb in practice. So they're going to be judged more on the games without him. Now, they're still a pretty good team without him. They've been able to beat the team right next to them in Louisville at home. They've been able to beat tournament quality opposition without him, which is saving them from potentially dropping even lower, in my opinion. And then we've got Louisville right behind them. Like I said, they just played. Louisville did get a important quad 1A win that they were looking for yesterday on the road at Miami. So they've got some good quality metrics. They've got 6 Q1B wins, which is obviously important, and no losses outside that. So I think Louisville could be pushing even further up if they're able to get another big win over, a team around them or above them in the ACC tournament. St. John's, second to last 6 seed, not much for them. They did win the conference outright in the Big East with UConn losing to Marquette. So good for them. They have got a little bit stronger numbers than some of the teams around them, but just the one. They do have a quad 3 loss and just 2-2 in quad 1A. 3 losses in quad 1B. So St. John's, the limit for them might be a 5 seed. With so many opportunities for these teams, it might just be not enough. In terms of the 7 seeds, we've got a bunch of blue teams: Kentucky, Utah State, BYU, and Villanova. Villanova and Kentucky have been bouncing between 6, 7, and 8 for a while now. Utah State, pretty similarly. They did pick up a nice win against New Mexico yesterday. They've still got pretty solid numbers. Still haven't played a game in the top part of Quad 1, but 3-4 in Quad 1B, which is pretty solid. BYU here is a big jumper. They came all the way up from a 9 seed for me. They have not been good without Richie Saunders, but they've beaten 2 tournament quality teams without him. So I don't really know if you can ding them all that much for losing him, because they were inconsistent with him, and they're now inconsistent without him. And in terms of just the bracketing rules, they do have to be in the West or the South region, BYU, because they cannot play on Sundays. It's a religious observance. And then on top of that, they can't play at a site in the first round, which plays Friday and Sunday. So they would have to go. I didn't do the sites for this projection, but I think there's a chance that they might not even be able to play Arizona They would be in Illinois' section here, so I don't know where they would go. I didn't get that far. Wanted to get this video out first, but there's a chance. I think they might have to avoid the 8-9 for BYU because of where they'd have to be in the West or the South, and I think the sites that Florida and Arizona would pick would be Friday, Sunday. So I think it might be 7 or 10 for BYU. If they fall into the 8, the committee would scrub them down all the way to the 10, so they wouldn't have to play on Sunday. But obviously, very, very interesting and tumultuous situation here for BYU. All right, on the 8, we've got Georgia, Clemson, Miami, and Iowa. Not a whole lot to do here. A lot of these teams are winning and losing a lot. All pretty solid resumes, pretty decent distance away from the bubble. They've each got a couple of nice wins. They've all filled out the back of Quad 1 very nicely. And they've all sort of lost a few games outside of Quad 1. So all these teams are pretty similar in my opinion, but with the state of the bubble right now, they are pretty clear of that. All right, so let's move the blocker down a little bit here. And our 9 seeds, we've got Ohio State, St. Louis, UCLA, and NC State. These are some teams going in some opposite directions here. I think Ohio State is playing as good as maybe a top 15 team in the country right now. Their resume has gotten incredibly better the last week and a half because they were on the bubble. Then they pick up some big wins. All of a sudden, they're 3-10 in Quad 1. They've got a resume average of 37 and a quality average of 25. So I think Ohio State might be able to get into this 8-9 game and see what happens from there. But they have 5 wins against the field plus the bubble right now. So they have fired up the seed list. In terms of UCLA, too, they beat Nebraska big and USC big yesterday. I think they're pretty solidly away from the bubble right now, 33-26 for their resume and quality numbers. They do have 3 Quad 1A wins. They didn't do a ton on the road this year, UCLA, but they only lost 1 game at home all year. So if they can, they're safe. But if they can get a neutral court win against a tournament team, they might be able to go up even further. And then St. Louis, from the Atlantic 10, they're 34-38 in the numbers, just 4 total losses. So I don't think they're at risk of missing the tournament, but they are just not playing good basketball right now. They've lost a couple down the stretch here, the A10 season. They got throttled by George Mason yesterday, who, George Mason's a solid team, but that shouldn't be happening. So St. Louis is going to go to the A10 tournament trying to play some better basketball. And if I had to guess right now, I would say that I don't think that they win it. You've got VCU playing well. You've got Dayton playing well. You've got a couple of other teams that are probably playing better than the Billikens. So at least the potential for a half bid still in there. And we'll get to why that's the case in the future. 10 seeds now. We've got UCF, Miami, Ohio, Texas, and Missouri. I feel like we've hit the UCF drum quite a bit over these past few weeks. They have great resume numbers, dreadful predictives, but they have enough wins against the field where they're going to be in. But their seeding might not be great. They're just 13-10 in meaningful games. So that's what it is for UCF. Texas and Missouri, low 40s, high 30s numbers across the board, and they are pretty similar situation to UCF. I think just a little bit less extreme. Texas is 10 and 12. Hold on, I'm scrolling over here. Texas is 10 and 13 in the top 3 quads, which is not great, but they have enough high quality wins to get them in. But, quality metrics will probably pull them away from the bubble a little bit, but their resume numbers put them at 48, which is right on the bubble. So for Texas, I think they're going to get in with the benefit of it probably being a weaker bubble than normal. And in terms of Miami, I did a video on them yesterday. We did have a question in the chat about whether they can win their first round game. Check out that video. I got to it all there. They haven't played since I did that video. So they will be in the NCAA tournament. They've got great resume numbers. They are at 33 right now, and even if they were to lose, they'd probably go down to the mid 40s maybe, or go up to the mid 40s. But yeah, that would get them in to the tournament. Just the single loss. Yeah, that'll get them in for sure. All right, we've got the bubble here, the 11 seeds. That is Texas A&M and TCU, our 6th and 5th to last team in. And then we've got those 4 teams as our last 4 in. The order of 4th to last team in is VCU, Santa Clara, SMU, and Stanford. So those other 3 teams were in the field. SMU is sort of falling on their face here. BJ Edwards is out for them. He's expected to return, but they need to do something here to get off the bubble. And then in terms of Stanford was a big riser yesterday. If you followed the Twitter or college basketball at all, every single team on the bubble lost pretty much. Every single one. And Stanford goes on the road to NC State, picks up a quad 1A road win. And then all of a sudden they have 6 wins against the field, 5 quad 1 wins. They have a resume of 47.3, which is good enough to be in. Their WAB is just below negative right now, so it was minus 0.1. So that puts them in an okay spot, and somebody had to take this spot. I mean, I had Indiana in the field. They lost. They probably shouldn't be in. Auburn's just 1 game over 500. They shouldn't be in. And then you have some risers like Cincinnati, who lost yesterday to TCU, and Oklahoma, who all of a sudden has 3 wins on the road against the field. Like, somebody had to take this spot. So I went with Stanford. When you're looking at these resumes, you're trying to find something that sticks out, right? And the 6 wins against the field and the bubble sticks out. They have good enough resume numbers now. They have a road win against the field. They have 6 total wins against the field in the bubble, 5 quad 1 wins. They're 21-11 overall. I have put them into the field, which, I was searching a little bit for somebody in that last spot, and I am going to bring up the Excel here of the bubble teams. Now, obviously, it took a lot of time here. There were 1 spot for these teams. And Indiana should be in there too, but it looks like they're not. So WAB is the thing that mattered the most last year. Here is the official WAB from the tournament, or from the NCAA. Auburn was the highest, then Virginia Tech, then Stanford, and then Cal, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Cincinnati. So Oklahoma and Cincinnati are a little bit off there in terms of WAB. These numbers are probably not going to be good enough. Of course, there's a lot of WAB opportunity in big games in the conference tournament. That could turn the tides for them. But after that, it really became down to these 5 teams. And Indiana's in there, too. I don't know why they weren't selected here. But then it really became these 3 plus Indiana, because Indiana's at point 3 WAB right now, I think. Let me check over here. All right, I don't know why Indiana's not selected. All right, so actually, hold on. Let's get rid of the Excel. Okay, here we go. So here's the WAB. So Indiana's at 0.13. So it's Auburn, Virginia Tech, Indiana, and Stanford that are above 0 WAB. And Torvik's WAB is a little different than the NCAA, but it's pretty close. So really it's down to those 4 teams for the last spot, in my opinion. WAB mattered big time last year, and they're all within 0.2 WAB. So I do think that is close enough to pick a team over the other. And Auburn's 1 game over 500. I don't think that they're going to make an exception for them. I think they're going to have to win 2 games in the SEC tournament, because if you win 2 and you lose 1, you're 18-16. Look, I wouldn't feel so great about putting them in, but at the same time, they have won quite a few games against the field. Virginia Tech is my first team out, I believe. Now, let me go back to the bracket here. Let's get rid of the right blocker, and let's get rid of the... Okay, so actually, yeah, Virginia Tech is my first team out, then Auburn, then Indiana, and then Cincinnati and Oklahoma. Virginia Tech was the last choice there for that last spot. Virginia Tech does have a road win against the field at Clemson. Their resume is in the high 40s, which might be close to enough, but 19 and 12, 6 and 2 in quad 2. Their 2 losses were at home to non-tournament teams in Florida, and I guess a tournament team now in Stanford. But nothing really sticks out to me here for Virginia Tech. Why should I select them? They have a road win against the field. Well, so does Auburn, so does Indiana, so does Stanford. So they don't get something over on there, and then their resume is worse. Stanford has more quad one wins, more wins against the field. So that's why I went Stanford over Virginia Tech. And then Virginia Tech is the first team out with Auburn, Indiana, and then Cincinnati. So that is the most recent projection. In terms of another full projection like this, I don't know if I'll do another one until Wednesday at the earliest. We're going to be doing a ton of videos, though, before then. But in terms of a full projection, it's probably going to be Thursday morning, if I had to guess. But very, very, very close, especially around the bubble, especially around this, 8, 9, and 10 seeds range, too. But conference tournaments roll on. We've still got some regular season games today in the Big Ten and a couple of other conferences, but this is the most recent projection. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. If you were with us live, thanks. If you were watching this later, be sure to like the posts that have come out. We're doing a lot of all-conference teams with some other creators, so be sure to interact with that content too. But thank you, everybody, for tuning in. I'll see you next time.